Growing up, my mom and dad were addicted to drugs. My dad used to beat on my mom and all of her kids. My dad went to jail when I was a little girl, and my mom was left alone to raise her 6 kids. I remember my mom always bouncing me from home to home. When I was 7 years old, I lived with my godmother for 2 years. Out of those 2 years, I was raped by my godbrother. When I was 9 years old, I remember telling my mother I didn't want to live there anymore, so she sent me to live with my aunt in Long Island. I stayed there until I was 11 years old because my aunt told me she felt that my mother wasn't going to be around much longer. My mother was very sick. Even though at this point she had stopped smoking cigarettes and using heroin, she was dealing with the after effects of using it for so many years. When I was 12 years old, my mother was hit by a car and passed away. Once my mother passed away, I started running away and got involved with the streets. I was a victim of C-Sect. I had a pimp that physically abused me and raped me almost every day. He forced me to sell my body for money. I was with him for 2 years before having the chance to run away from him. When I got arrested, I was kind of happy because I felt as if I was being saved. I was hoping to receive help and start dealing with my problems, but it was as if they completely ignored that part. I had asked to see a counselor, and they told me, okay. It took 3 months for me to see one. It was never consistent, and it didn't help. All we did was play games. I felt as if they made us keep our problems inside. It didn't seem like they really wanted to know the true story, the real issues that I had been dealing with my whole life. They just made me take 3 different medications and told me I was just an angry girl.
I was born in a women's prison where my mother was locked up. When I was 2 days old, I was taken from my mother and placed with my grandmother in San Francisco, California. I never knew my father, and my mother was incarcerated my entire life. I was raised by my grandmother, who was forced to work several jobs to pay for the extra expense of caring for me. We lived in public housing, also known as the projects. Every day on my way to school, I had to navigate through drug dealers, drug addicts, and poor folks looking for their next crime victim. I saw my first shooting when I was 9 years old. My house was accidentally shot into twice. Luckily, no one was hit. Although shootings were a regular scene where I'm from, the instantaneous fear that comes when you hear a gunshot always left me and my family trembling for days and saying things like, "We got to get out of these projects." We all knew it was a very real possibility that one of us could be accidentally or purposely shot and killed. Over the years, I've witnessed countless murders, many of which were classmates and friends. This made it difficult for me to focus in school, and when I was 13, I began smoking marijuana and drinking as a way to escape the daily violence. At that time, I didn't see much of a future for myself, due in part to a lack of positive role models. The positive role models that existed at the time were not made visible to me in my neighborhood or in my school. I attended the worst of the worst public schools, complete with rundown facilities, outdated books, curricula that undervalued minority communities, and overall had a very low standard of excellence. At 13, I got arrested for the first time and was charged with assault. I was taken to San Francisco's juvenile hall and began a cycle of going in and out of detention. I was locked up 10 different times within a 2-year period. Inside juvie, I met other girls like myself who were there for prostitution, assault, theft, and truancy. We were not violent girls. We were girls who were hurting. All of us were from the same neighborhoods, poor families, and seemed to have the same disposition of trauma and anger mixed with hopelessness. Being confined to a tiny cement room was one of the hardest things I have ever had to experience. Being locked up, all I could do was reflect on my life, but it didn't seem to help. I became even more withdrawn and angry. I felt completely disconnected from my family, from friends, and the counselors inside offered no support for the real problems I was facing. I felt like nobody believed that I could actually do something positive with my life, especially the staff inside the facilities, who treated me like a case number, not like a person. At that time, what I needed was to talk to folks about all I had been through, to feel connected to people, to feel useful, so that I could find my own direction in life. I needed to heal from the trauma and be supported with love and encouragement.
what we've urged for is that instead of the detention of our girls, that our girls should be put into what are called strength-based, trauma-based programs so that girls can heal as opposed to be placed in detention. We were incorporated in 2003. We are a small, underfunded organization, and yet we have really been able to powerfully change the landscape of policies impacting the lives of vulnerable mothers and girls. When we first started doing the work, we recognized that very few mothers had access to family treatment. Essentially, if you are a mother who is suffering from untreated addiction, you will be turned away from most treatment programs in the U.S. Most treatment programs do not accept pregnant and parenting women. So that leaves mothers with what we term a Sophie's choice between treatment or your children. We have taken family treatment capacity and increased it by 16-fold. And we've been able to do that because mothers who went through traditional treatment programs and then went into family treatment programs have been able to talk to lawmakers about why family treatment was more effective and how difficult it was to be in treatment without your child, or to be turned away from treatment because you wanted your child with you. Most families who come to the attention of child welfare are families dealing with substance abuse issues. Substance abuse is the leading reason for out-of-home placement of children. We have been successful at taking $145 million in federal child welfare funding and making that available to family treatment programs, so that instead of breaking up the family and putting the child in foster care or kinship care, the child is able to stay with her mother in a family treatment program and healing together. We have been able, really single-handedly, to stop the practice of shackling mothers who are behind bars during labor, delivery, and post-delivery. It was a practice in all federal correctional facilities that when a mother behind bars went into labor and delivery, that she was shackled. We documented stories where mothers who went through a C-section were shackled during the actual C-section operation and were forced to have the shackle on their bellies post C-section. We were able to work with Senator Durbin's office in negotiating with the Bureau of Prisons to stop this draconian practice of shackling mothers behind bars.
When I walked in this room, I felt your hands upon me, to think how great you are. Still you would touch someone like me.